You got to take your shirt off. I can't be taking all the heat in the comments this week.
What's cracking, big dogs? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the headquarters. This is Bunkbed Breakdowns, which is BDGE's weekly dynasty show hosted by Michael down there, Mr. FB God over there, looking beautiful with this little hairstyle he's got going on.
Whatever.
Mike, thankfully, has his shirt on this time around, so I know you guys will actually be able to pay attention to the big facts and not mesmerized by them little titties down there. Today's episode is going to be our all-fade list for rookies. This is a dynasty show, but since it's August, since it's clickbait season, we need to focus a little bit on the redraft stuff. You know, rookies are a big part of redraft year in and year out, especially the running backs, some of the wide receivers. So we want to cover what guys that, you know, there's some guys that we love in dynasty, but we're going to be fading in redraft, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you missed last week's episode, we talked about the must-own rookies. Them two were on it. I was not on that one, but they talked about the rookies that they will be targeting in redraft, so go back and check that out. Make sure you do so on their YouTube channel and on their podcast. And before we get into it, if you want the entirety, the list of our entire all-fade list, everything's in the guide. The Big Dogs Guide is live. The rookie, the dynasty, the season-long, the all-fade list, the must-own list, the rankings. Everything is in there. The easiest way to get that, monkeyknifefight.com. Use the promo code BDGE. When you deposit $10 and play a game on there, you will get all of said things for free when you deposit the $10 on there. I'm going to give away 2 draft guides this episode. What you got to do is follow Michael, follow FB God on Twitter, and leave them a podcast review. Bunkbed Breakdowns podcast in the iTunes store. You leave a review, you send one of us a screenshot or some shit, and we will pick 2 draft guide winner giveaways for next week. I'm going to pass away. Someone take the mic.
It's exciting to host with Rafael Nadal and Nick.
All right, let's hit that intro.
All right, boys. Last episode was fun. Didn't put on a shirt. Decided to tuck my shirt in today. But we're still going to be dropping them big-ass facts. We're going to kick it off with my 101, the 102 for Nick and Noah, Jonathan Taylor. We're all about this dude in Dynasty, but he's currently going at pick 46 overall in the beginning of the 4th round at RB19. And I don't know about you guys, but I think at this price, even as a Jonathan Taylor truther through and through, it's just too steep, because what you're passing up to get someone like Jonathan Taylor there is DJ Moore, Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham, Juju Smith-Schuster, all guys that have top 5 legitimate upside. And if you constructed your roster right, which means you did not go 0 RB because it's fucking dumb. Actually, someone put out a tweet that said we're all going to be 0 RB because nobody's going to be drafting this year because no season. It's pretty funny. But yeah, if you drafted right and you took a couple running backs in the early rounds, you are going to need to get wide receivers. And this is the money zone, money shot, Rachel Starr level money shot content. Okay. Allen Robinson is not something you can pass up. And as much as I love Jonathan Taylor, I just can't pull the trigger there.
The dudes that we know that are rookies that come into the year and we know they're going to be in a committee, like even the guys you like, Jonathan Taylor, last year was Miles Sanders and David Montgomery. Like, you could love them as a prospect, but you know they're going to be in a committee. You can't be taking those guys in the 3rd or 4th round. You know what you're getting yourself into. Like, it's not worth a 3rd round investment or a 4th round investment, because you're going to need to play your 3rd and 4th round players in the starting spots and in the flex positions. And you're not going to be able to count on a lot of these players early on in the year. So we might see a Jonathan Taylor esque Miles Sanders season, right? Back half of the year, and him blow up and help you win a league or whatever. But Miles Sanders was also like a 6th, 7th, 8th round pick last year. Mm-hmm. So you weren't depending on him to produce in your lineup. So way too early for Jonathan Taylor. For me, everything out of Indy's camp has just been running back by committee. We're sharing the load. We're sharing the load. No one's arguing whether or not Taylor's better than Mac. That's not the argument here. There's no argument to be made from Mac's side. But like the valuable touches through the passing game, we don't know if they're going to go to Taylor. It's not a good redraft situation for Jonathan Taylor. And the price capital based on his talent is just, it doesn't add up. It should not be a thing right now.
Yeah, and alongside those wide receivers that Mike named, which I would prefer all of them to Jonathan Taylor. Looking at the running backs in that range, like Melvin Gordon is in that range. He has a much safer floor, and I think he has just as high, if not higher, of a ceiling behind that Denver offensive line, probably getting the goal line and passing down work. Just like Nick said, like we don't know exactly what his role is. Maybe he's the goal line back. Maybe he's not. He's not going to be the pass down back. Him and Marlon Mack are probably going to split touches between the 20s as well. So he's somebody I'm a little bit worried about. Even later, Chris Carson going a half a round later, even though he might not be the healthiest guy out there, if he's on the field, we know what he is. He's a top 10 to 12 running back who sees 20 to 25 touches in a game with very little competition, despite what Yannick thinks about Carlos Hyde and his Ohio State days. He's basically in the dirt at this point. And Chris Carson, we've seen what he is in the NFL. And another guy we talked about last week, J.K. Dobbins. He's RB30 going a few rounds after. Like, we know both of these guys, Taylor and Dobbins, aren't going to be passing down specialists. But we also think with J.K. Dobbins' situation, the fact that Mark Ingram is a little bit older and the talent that he has, he might be in line for a second half breakout like we saw with Miles Sanders, which is also the case for Jonathan Taylor. But the thing is, you're getting him at a 2-round discount in comparison to Taylor's price. So give me J.K. Dobbins 2 rounds later, any day of the week. And just like Mike said, I'll take a DJ Moore, Allen Robinson over Jonathan Taylor because they're so safe and they're just going to be in your lineup week in and week out, and you know what you'll get out of them.
Yeah, Fantasy is easy this year. 2 running backs early, 2 or 3 wide receivers in a row. Grab DeAndre Swift in round 6. Grab J.K. Dobbins in round 8, and you're going to be fucking set to go for the year because one of those 2 is going to pop off. Taylor's price is just too early for anyone that's sane.
Yeah, I mean that's like the exact reason why. Like we talked about last week, like J.K. Dobbins could be that league winner for you. It's a low probability, but like if he hits, like he could be that low league winner for you. And he's the reason why like you can't go Jonathan Taylor here. And honestly, like for me, like that round 3 to round 5 is like the RB dead zone for me. I rarely take RBs there just because, especially like now, like when you have like so much good wide receiver value there. So like even like Melvin Gordon, I think it's a little bit risky, but definitely a better case. And like you said, Chris Carson going later, a guy who has question marks, but a lot more volume. But yeah, generally speaking, I'm taking RB early. I'm fading RB in the middle part. And then once we get to like that like late 5th, 6th, 7th round, when you're starting to think about drafting like flex plays and backups, that's when I'm looking for guys like J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, and what have you. And J.K. Dobbins happens to be the cheapest one. So that's when I'm going to pretty much every single draft.
Yeah, and another rookie running back that we will be fading that has pretty much been fading out of the picture in itself because just like with the Marlon Mack reports about how he's going to handle some work there, Ronald Jones has not stopped getting headlines down in Tampa Bay. I think it's real, man. I really do. I'm glad I kind of bought in like a month or so ago, and I think the headlines are real there. They keep saying it over and over again that Ronald Jones is the guy. Everybody else is competing. This summer couldn't have gone worse for Keyshawn Vaughn, just in terms of like situating himself into the NFL. Fun prospect, really good weighted adjusted speed score, which I think is like the thing that most people are kind of like hanging on to right now. 3rd round draft capital is not something to go crazy about. That's not like replacement level draft capital. Like, yes, you take a 3rd round running back because you might need depth or you might think this guy has some upside, but 3rd round is not typically where you're like, okay, this is going to be our starter rolling forward. Keyshawn Vaughn doesn't have the summer to practice with Tom Brady. Darrynton Gumbawale, pass catcher there. Ronald Jones, a lot of early down work. Keyshawn Vaughn just is a really, really easy fade and redraft, in my opinion.
Yeah, the reason why I'm not on the Keyshawn Vaughn train, at least for this year, I do like him a little bit more in Dynasty than redraft, is you kind of touched on it. Like, so much is going wrong for him. He got put on the COVID list, which means in an already shortened offseason, in a brand new offense, obviously because he's a rookie, new quarterback in that system, he's not going to be able to practice with them. We've seen Ronald Jones get the hype, and Dare, I'm not going to even try to pronounce his last name or whatever the fuck it is. Mike, no chance.
I just did that. That was the first time I ever got it correct. Like, I don't know where that came from. I think I like blacked out when I said it. Darrynton, which is like, and it came out and like no one made a face and no one corrected me. And I was like, oh shit, I got that right.
While you're hot, Nick, say Albert O's last name.
I don't even, what's the second letter of it? I don't even know.
K.
K?
Yeah.
Albert Abungawale.
Yep.
They're brothers. They brothers.
But along with him being on the COVID list, we've also seen what Bruce Arians has done in the past with younger running backs. Ronald Jones last year played 40% of snaps in back-to-back weeks just 3 times, and it took until week 15 through 17 for him to hit that mark 3 weeks in a row, despite Peyton Barber being terrible. And if we remember back to David Johnson's rookie year in Arizona, it took him until week 13 to see more than 10 touches in a single game. even though up until that point on 54 touches, he scored 7 touchdowns, not including, but he also had an additional kick return touchdown. So it's not really a question of talent. I think it's just more the situation that he's in. The coach that he's playing with doesn't like to give rookies a big role off the jump. If you're picking him at RB36, you want a guy who is going to give you upside. You're not choosing an RB3 so you can put an RB3 in your lineup every week because that's like 4 points a game. I just don't think he has the upside that many people may think. I'm not sure he's going to be the passing down guy just because he was good at catching passes in college. Ronald Jones did decently with the ball in his hands through the air last year. Ronald Jones is probably a better runner at this point of his career, and he just has more longevity in that offense. So at RB36, it's not like it's an extremely high price to pay, but you see Zach Moss going 1.5 rounds later, who has a cemented role, is probably going to handle some passing down work in the goal line, which can't be said for Keyshawn Vaughn, or even Alexander Madison at RB40, who's going to have a role whether or not Dalvin Cook is hurt. And Dalvin Cook does not have a good track record of staying healthy. And if he goes down, we know Madison is the top 10 to 12 running back for fantasy if that happens.
Yeah, I'm on board with you guys. I'm actually just fading Keyshawn Vaughn altogether. Dynasty, redraft, doesn't matter. I just think, the hype got a little bit out of control, and like Keyshawn Vaughn truthers, like the only thing they had to hang on to was like Ronald Jones couldn't catch passes and Ronald Jones couldn't pass pro, which I think is like a super overrated thing. Anyways, like, look, I'm not a Ronald Jones truther. I'm not going out and buying a bunch of Ronald Jones either. I think that backfield is pretty messy. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with Rojo. And I just think there's just it just doesn't make sense to me that he's going to RB36 when there's like other guys that are more flex starter appeal, like Zach Moss, that are going a full round later. You also have like high upside wide receiver threes like Deontay Johnson, Christian Kirk, who are probably all starting for you in your wide receiver 3 or flex spots. So like there's just no way I'm taking starters over Keyshawn Vaughn in that spot. If he was going like maybe, I don't know, a few rounds later in like that handcuff range, like maybe then it'd be a little bit more interesting. But yeah, it's just way too pricey for me here.
Yeah, he's dropped almost as much as like anybody, I think, over the last couple months. But even now, where he's down the draft board, like it's guys like Darius Slayton that I think I'd probably rather have on my team than him. And there's these high upside tight ends like the Jonnu Smiths going after him. Other wide receivers like Henry Ruggs, I'd even put over Keyshawn Vaughn, because I think like best case scenario, like what even is his upside? I don't think there's any chance that anyone in this backfield actually gets a 3-down roll. Like best case scenario, him and Ronald Jones probably split carries, because right now it's very much in favor of Ronald Jones. And I don't know. I just don't see a world where Keyshawn Vaughn makes an impact in redraft leagues this year. Yeah. I could see the whole backfield, honestly, being replaced by 2021.
It's also important to note that, like, obviously COVID affects older people a little bit more heavily, and we know Keyshawn Vaughn is a bit of an older prospect. So
he's 30, right?
Look out for that. Yeah, he's basically 30, which means he's 50. He's almost retired. So
he's older than Bruce Arians.
The whole thing with COVID too, like I don't know why people want their players to get COVID. Like it doesn't make sense. Yeah. We don't know. We have no idea what the long-term effects of this shit are. Like what if players go out there and after a full game of the NFL, they're just like, yo, I don't feel right. I had COVID. I went out. My heart was fucked up. Like that could very much happen too. So,
that's the thing. Did you see the tweet from Vaughn Miller? He basically tweeted like he had COVID, and this is like a peak athlete, like top half percentile, top 0.01 percentile of the world in terms of peak athleticism. And he basically said like he couldn't eat. He lost like 15 pounds, lost all his strength. Like when I read that, I was like, if someone gets COVID like during the season, that's a lock.
It's not just like oh, he tests negative for it, now he's back to NFL status. Like there's probably a lot more to it that we don't know. So having it makes it a little bit nervous. He did just get off the COVID IR list, I think, a couple days ago, but like that does not guarantee any sort of health or back to prospect, level athleticism that he came into the league with. So
yep. And speaking about somebody that came into the league with athleticism, we got our least favorite running back of all time, AJ Dillon. Fuck AJ Dillon. All my homies hate AJ Dillon. RB55 off the board.
My homies hate AJ Dillon.
All I have to say about him is this guy stinks. Like, I don't understand why anybody would draft him in redraft. You need both Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones to get hurt for him to have any sort of value. Because if Aaron Jones gets hurt, we still know Jamal Williams is going to be on the field and passing down snaps. He's probably going to get some of the goal line works too. So you're going to get a between the tackles grinder and AJ Dillon. I'm not a fan of that. If Jamal Williams gets hurt, Aaron Jones edges him out in every single aspect of the field. So although it's a season where we'll likely see a lot of players in and out of the lineup because of various different types of injuries, like obviously COVID on top of what else is normally happening to running backs, there's too much that needs to go wrong for something to go right for A.J. Dillon. And he's not somebody that's ever going to catch passes. He's never going to take over the goal line work from Aaron Jones. And I'm pretty sure Aaron Rodgers hates this guy because the whole draft was just set up to piss Aaron Rodgers off. So I think him alone is just going to keep him off the field. And if you want to make the argument that draft capital matters and him being a second-round pick means something, keep in mind they took a quarterback in round 1, a fat-ass running back in round 2, and a fucking fullback in round 3. So I really don't care where he was picked. This guy is a fraud. I don't care if he went to BC, and that's my mom's alma mater. This guy's not going to be anything in the league, and I'm not afraid to say it. And also, I've been burnt in the past by big, fat running backs who can run a 4.5. So I have a decent track record. Actually, I have a terrible track record. But I know enough now to fade a guy like A.J. Dillon going into this year.
Yeah, look, to what player is A.J. Dillon most oft compared?
Derrick Henry.
We had like a guy that used to hand out hot dogs at our high school football games. He reminds me of him a little bit.
Yeah, Derrick Henry. Okay, if we think about the situation, it's also pretty similar, right? Like Derrick Henry was a 3rd-round pick, albeit not a 2nd-round pick. But we all know Green Bay's track record with draft picks isn't the brightest. But would you have been happy to own Derrick Henry in his first year? Because they're equally explosive athletes, right? Like, do you want to know how many times Derrick Henry went above 80 yards in his rookie year? How many times?
0.
Okay. Like you're looking at a stat line most likely of like 100 to 150 carries, like 500 to 600 yards, and like maybe like 5 to 6 touchdowns. That is not startable at the running back position. And it is not a gamble I want to make that he's gonna have 0 work in the receiving game. And if anything, Aaron Jones now is much better than DeMarco Murray was when Derrick Henry was a rookie. So I think there's just like too much in the way. In fact, like that entire backfield is a little bit risky. Even Aaron Jones at his ADP feels a little bit risky. But there's no way in hell I'm drafting a AJ Dillon because like this is not like someone that has very much upside if Aaron Jones goes down for the reasons Noah said. But like roster spots are just way too freaking important early on, right? You cannot afford to hold a AJ Dillon on the back part of your bench when you need to be cycling through those waivers, getting that early round waiver action. So it's just not someone that I'm trying to deal with. He's like someone you'll draft and you'll be like, like I can't really drop him.
He's the first guy you're going to end up dropping when you actually have to drop him.
Yeah, and then by that time you would have missed out on the first 3 weeks of really important waivers. So all he does is damage your roster. Just fade him. Just don't draft him.
Yeah, your dumbass kept A.J. Dillon on the bench in favor of Terry McLaurin and DJ Chark. You drop A.J. Dillon for guys like that. You don't draft A.J. Dillon, okay? Probably like the least elusive back I've ever actually watched on film. I can't wait. I don't want to – fuck him. I can't wait to see him not be good in the NFL. The problem with A.J. Dillon is he doesn't have a floor or a ceiling. He doesn't have either of those things. There are going to be multiple games. There are going to be multiple games this year where his stat line is 3 carries for like 1 yard. Like, that's going to happen a couple times. He's not going to catch a lot of passes there in Green Bay. He never did it at Boston College. Literally had 300 carries his freshman year at Boston College with 0 receptions. I don't know how that's even fucking mathematically possible, but that's the kind of game he brings onto the field. So, fantasy-wise, there's nothing there to love about A.J. Dillon, especially not in 2020.
Yeah. Looking at guys going around him, Mike Williams, the God, Golden Tate, Ryan Fitzpatrick. And
I'll take A.J. Dillon there on that first.
All right, we can move on to the next guy. I don't want to do this anymore.
All right, next up, we got another running back. Someone that we liked early on, in the pre-draft process. Darrynton Evans, running back for the Tennessee Titans, going at 171 overall, so in the 15th round at RB 57. Sounds cheap, but I just can't get myself to draft him here because I just don't see it. I mean, I get it, he's a handcuff, but will he take all the work if Derrick Henry goes down? Will Derrick Henry go down? Like the Titans, I get it, they're like a really run heavy team, right? But it doesn't mean that if Derrick Henry goes down, they're going to keep running Darrynton Evans like they run Derrick Henry. So I just think that when it comes to Evans, it just comes down to like, who else can I get, right? Who else are you getting in that range? You got Golden Tate, right? Who's probably starting games for you, led the Giants in receptions and yards when he was actually playing. You got even Brandon Ayuk probably got a better shot, right? You got Irv Smith, which is one of my top late round tight end targets. Like there's just too many other guys that are start worthy that I just don't really find myself clicking the button on him. I just don't see him being a true handcuff to begin with.
Let's put it this way, because no one's just drafting Evans for the sake of drafting him. I think the only reason you would even think about it is if you are a Derrick Henry owner. I think handcuffs are pretty important this year, given like the state of what everything is. But I think handcuffs only make sense when you actually know there's a handcuff. Like you're making the point where like if I think, first of all, whenever you have to analyze a player like a back end running back, and you're like, if the guy ahead of him gets hurt, that's all the analysis you need, because you don't need to go any further, because that's dumb fucking analysis. And if you're depending on a player to get into your starting lineup because you're depending on an injury, then you shouldn't draft that guy, straight up. That's the way I look at things now. But if I am drafting like a Kenyon Drake, I want to get Chase Edmonds. If I am drafting Zeke Elliott, I do want to get Tony Pollard, Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison, because we know if something does happen to those guys, we know what the workload is going to be like for the guys behind him. With Evans, we don't even know that, because he's 200 pounds, 205 pounds. Like, they're not going to use him in the capacity that they use Derrick Henry. That being said, though, like, he will be probably like a high-end RB2 if something happens to Henry. So I might go ahead and grab Evans if I'm a Henry owner, but like for no other reason would you draft him this year.
I'm a little bit different than you on that point. Like, I never draft handcuffs for my team in redraft, at least. In Dynasty, I do. But in redraft, like, I'm typically going for like upside, because like my philosophy is like, I don't really build for safety, right? So like if my Zeke pick busts, if my Dalvin Cook pick busts, Dalvin Cook's a little bit different because he's a holdout. But if that pick busts, then I'm probably kind of fucked anyways. But like if I draft like Alexander Madison, I don't own Dalvin Cook, and Dalvin Cook holds out, like that's a huge spike to my team. So I'm trying to look for like high variance plays. Very rarely do I like draft my own handcuffs. I'm usually drafting handcuffs for other teams. But to your point, even in that scenario, we don't know if Darrynton Evans is that guy. So like that's like my holdup with him.
Yeah,
I feel like you go.
Bitch. I've changed my tune on that. I thought that way for a while too, but I think there's no worse feeling than your starting running back getting hurt and then you not getting the guy on the waiver. I think the one additional bench spot, especially for people in leagues this year where you're probably expanding your bench a little bit, like I think the handcuff does make sense, because it works either way. Like having someone else's handcuff, having your handcuff, it's just a good thing to have as long as it makes sense for the roster that you're building. I get like the whole like upside, you want someone else's thing, but like I also think that if you have a good team, that protects your playoff spot probably if you lose.
No, I don't draft good teams, so I don't have that problem either.
Very true. I don't know who I'm talking to over here.
That's some animal analysis right there, Mike.
All right, Noah, you may continue. I'll allow it.
Man, fuck Darrynton Evans. I just said the same thing about AJ Dillon. Mike, you also left out Mike Williams when you're listing alternatives to him. I caught that. But as you guys said, people want Darrynton Evans to be Derrick Henry if Derrick Henry goes down, because we've seen what Derrick Henry is. But Darrynton Evans is 50 pounds lighter, probably the same sort of athleticism, and we saw what the Tennessee Titans want to do. They want to run it off the left tackle 35 times a game and throw it 10 times. That's like Mike Vrabel's wet dream. Darrynton Evans is not going to be that. Even if Derrick Henry goes down, I see him as like a 10 to 15 touch a player per week, and we don't know who's behind him. I don't even know if Dion Lewis is still in the NFL, but what I would expect is what Dion Lewis would kind of get if Derrick Henry were to go down, and I just don't think that's a very high upside player to invest in. I don't think he's going to catch a ton of passes, not because he's not capable of it, but because it's not a very pass-heavy team, and I think they'd rather throw to Johnny Smith or A.J. Brown or Corey Davis if that guy has hands anymore. But I'm just not – I don't know which side I'd land on when it comes to owning handcuffs. I would just much rather have a Golden Tate or a Ryan Fitzpatrick in a Superflex league than hoping a beast like Derrick Henry goes down halfway through the season.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, 100%. And, like, do you know who's going after Darrynton Evans, who I would much rather have? Anthony McFarland. He's going, like, a full round after him. And, you know, granted, like, he's not going to be a workhorse either if something goes down, but he might actually have some, like, explosive plays in him, even if he's, like, you know, Connor stays healthy, which we know is a big-ass question mark. All right, next up, rookie wide receiver, Henry Ruggs. And this is not really hate on Henry Ruggs, as you'll see. We kind of put Jeudy on there as well, just based on where they're going. But Henry Ruggs is currently going in the 12th round, wide receiver 46 at pick 143 overall. Personally, again, redraft, I just very, very rarely draft rookie wide receivers because they're just rarely a value. And, like, you can almost always, like, pick them off waivers. Like, A.J. Brown was off waivers, right? Like, McLaurin was off waivers. Marquise Brown was off waivers. Like, all these guys, you can usually, like, what happens is, like, for 1 to 2 weeks, they, like, might not do anything, and then people get tired of it. And when you need spots in redraft, which are really important, they end up hitting the waivers. And then at that point, you'll have, like, a trend. You can see, like, who's getting the snaps. And that's, like, the point where I start picking up rookie wide receivers. So, you know, instead of getting someone like him, I'd much rather grab, like, a John Brown, a Sterling Shepard, or if you really, really want to invest in a rookie wide receiver, you can grab, like, a Rager or Justin Jefferson a little bit later as well.
Yeah, for me, I think I actually like this price because those guys that you name, like a John Brown or a Jalen, I do like Jalen Reagor more than him, but more of the safer options like a John Brown or a Sterling Shepard. I feel like 12 rounds in, you kind of already have your starters and a few other guys that you feel safe putting in your flex spot off the bench. And I've been very vocal about not being a huge Henry Ruggs fan, but it's hard to deny the type of upside that he has. He's not just a deep threat. He is good over the middle and then taking a 15-yard slant to the house, which is what Derek Carr can only do, is like throw 5 to 15 yards. I think he is a very talented player, and I think them drafting him in the first round, although like Darius Hayward-Bay under that same regime was like a first-round pick because he ran fast in tights, I do think Henry Ruggs is a better football player than Darius Hayward-Bay because he made his way to Alabama and he competed with other really good players. As wide receiver 46 off the board, I personally, I don't know, I don't hate it. I'm looking, I'd see Duke Johnson, Blake Jarwin, Chase Edmonds, Tyrod Taylor. That's intriguing. But like a bunch of guys that I don't really like around him, as opposed to like the upside that a Henry Ruggs can provide for you.
Yeah, I'm on board with you, Noah. I actually don't hate Henry Ruggs here. He might be like one of the only rookie wide receivers that I'll target in redraft based on their price. Like I'm not going to take Jeudy. I'm not going to take CeeDee Lamb if you need to take him in the single-digit rounds. But Henry Ruggs, I feel like keeps going in the double-digit rounds. And I do weirdly, oddly, I want a piece of this passing offense in Oakland. I'm probably going to have Derek Carr as my quarterback 2 or 3 in a lot of super flex leagues. And I will probably own some Ruggs. I won't stack pass catchers there. Absolutely not. But I probably will have a lot of teams where I have Carr and then one of either Waller, Renfro, or Henry Ruggs. So I'm okay with any of those 3 pass catchers, but I'm definitely not going to be like, oh, I have Waller, let me also grab fucking Henry Ruggs, because like you said, Derek Carr is not really capable of dishing out multiple fantasy games to all these pass catchers over here. So Henry Ruggs, I do think he's just an explosive playmaker. And when you're looking at those guys at the end of your bench, I don't think drafting for a floor makes any sense because, okay, a guy has a floor play, that means he'll never hit your lineup. Like there's no use for him on your bench. The guy has a ceiling. If he hits that ceiling, then he can get into your lineup. I mean, there's a reason he's on the bench because you haven't seen the ceiling yet once you start doing it consistently, which is something I think Ruggs actually does provide around that draft price where not a lot of people do. So I'm kind of in with Ruggs just because his big playmaking, explosive ability is something that like might kind of shine through in a rookie year where we don't have the chemistry buildup between quarterbacks and wide receivers.
Yeah, I think if Sterling Shepard wasn't there, I could get on board with that. Or if Jalen Reagor and Justin Jefferson were going for cheaper, I could probably also get on board with that. But Sterling Shepard being there is just making me kind of totally fade Ruggs because Sterling Shepard averaged like 8 targets a game when he was healthy.
Are you know points per concussion league? He's really good in those.
Yeah, he's really good in those. But like I mean, he had like 100 yards on a couple of games as well. So he's got that like weekly wide receiver 1 upside, but probably like a middling wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 points per game finish, which is like pretty good.
I can't take Shepard, bro. Like every time I hear the name, I just like fall asleep a little bit more. It's just like the most boring pick. I get it. Like he does like quietly produce really, really, really fucking well whenever he's on the field. But I don't know. Can't find myself pulling the trigger there. That's where I like to go with an upside player over a floor player like Shep.
Cool. And then next up, Jerry Jeudy, we kind of mentioned him. He's going at 138 overall, wide receiver 44 in the 12th round. Again, for me, like similar range as Henry Ruggs, but there's just like in that range, I'm just not going to take someone like Jerry Jeudy or a rookie wide receiver when I have some of the better options available. I just honestly, I just don't see Drew Lock supporting 2 top 24 wide receivers and like a top 10 tight end plus Melvin Gordon, which is like basically what the ADP is trying to suggest. So I'm kind of all out on that price, and I'm just going to like take my time and do a little studying on how the snap percentage evolves over the first few weeks to see which young wide receiver I should be looking at in redraft.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty spread out target share there. Like they have Noah Fant, they have Cortland Sutton, they just brought in Melvin Gordon. We both like, or all 3 of us like KJ Hamler. I just don't see the sort of upside that he can bring to the table that Henry Ruggs does at a very similar price. So I think I'd rather have Henry Ruggs than Jerry Jeudy. Obviously, the guys we named before, like a Jalen Reagor, even like a Justin Jefferson, I feel more confident pulling the trigger on than Jerry Jeudy, just because like we haven't really seen, especially under Drew Lock, Denver produce like more than one fantasy valuable wide receiver since the Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders days, and those are very, very long gone. So I'm sorry, Animal. I'm sorry, Snacks, because we kind of just disparaged Giants and Denver. I almost said Nuggets, Denver Broncos players, but it's the truth. You're getting the big facts, and that's just a guy I'm going to fade because I just don't see any sort of upside being drafted there in the 12th round.
Beautiful. Killing two morons with one stone right there. Yeah, I just like even like you say, like we haven't seen Drew Lock support two fantasy wide receivers. Like we barely saw him support one. Like Cortland Sutton's numbers sank really like fucking Titanic sinking over there when Drew Lock got onto the field. So it's messy. Like the number of games that Jerry Judy's probably going to go like 5 for 42 this year is going to be nauseating. But to Mike's point, like most of the rookie wide receivers, it's like literally annually. Every year we see it. Rookie wide receivers play 50% of the snaps from weeks 1 to 8. And then the coaches are like, oh, you're pretty good. We'll keep you out on the field. And then from weeks 9 through 17, it's like 70, 80, 85%. That's when you start targeting. So the best way to do this is to start looking at the snap percentage. Of course, there are going to be outliers where you have the Terrys who blow up in week 1. And if you don't get them there, you're never going to get them. But for the most part, these guys are on very limited snaps. And those are the things to keep an eye on. So I will give lineups.com is a resource that you guys can use, which is completely free. And it shows the snaps for each player by position, by team, by percentage, by raw count total. So a lot of people always ask, like, where do we find snaps and stuff? So lineups.com is a good one for that. If you want to look for like or routes run during the game, you'll have to sign up for an actual premium package on PFF to find that one. But we'll be giving you those big facts throughout the season. So don't even fucking worry about buying that shit. Buy our shit. What else we got?
I mean, we want to talk a little bit about Antonio Gibson. You know, he's currently based on the last month's ADP, he's still pretty reasonable. He's going at 142, right ahead of Henry Ruggs. You can probably throw that number out. I'm expecting him to probably jump up to wherever Geis was. So Geis was going at RB33 overall in the 8th round of Superflex drafts, 6th round of your traditional 1 QB drafts. That's the minimum price that I think he's going to jump to. I would assume that he probably even goes above that because Geis is gone. I mean, all you have is Adrian Peterson. I think if he jumps to like the 6th or the 5th round, I'm probably out because it's just too much risk. And I mean, look, we love Antonio Gibson, and anyone that loves Antonio Gibson, like we did, like what we said, he was the RB6 before he even went to the combine, right? That was our ranking. So we're really high on him, but like we also recognize the risk. Like, dude, the guy only has 7 touches, right? It's a big question mark. It's a question mark, but it's not a killer on his ceiling because we've seen what his ceiling is, right? Because when he got those touches, he was one of the best players on the field, and that's what he can be. But betting on him to start for you week 1, which is basically what you're saying, if you're drafting someone in the 4th or 5th or even 6th round, is not a smart investment, and is definitely not one I will be making in redraft. So if he goes there, which is what I expect, I will be fully fading him in redraft.
Yeah, I think one of the bigger points to take away here, and this is just like the talent optimism that people have in fantasy is usually a huge problem. Like there's only so much talent that can overcome a Washington football team. Like best case scenario, like even if I think like Gibson getting 12 touches would be amazing for fantasy. Like that's what we want, right? If you're drafting him there, you're like, oh, he better get 12 touches or some shit. What is 12 touches in Washington's offense? Like it really might not be that much. If 4 or 5 of them are runs up the middle, is he really going to do much behind an offensive line that's not going to open up holes for him? So the problem is not that there's too much allure without the production and without the seeing him be efficient in the face of volume, but it's also the fact that he's just objectively look at the situation. Like what running back, like if Zeke is in this Washington offense, like how high do you actually draft him? Yeah, he's going to get the volume, but like this is a team that's not going to dictate goal line touches. This is a team that's not going to push the ball downfield much. There's a lot of risk involved just with any player on the team. Like I love Terry, but like I'm very much aware that there's a coin flip chance that Dwayne Haskins fucking stinks and this team goes down the gutter like really quickly, right? And that's a case with running backs, a case with wide receivers, tight ends, whoever it is. So not only like do you need him to overcome whatever running back by committee is going to be there for. AP is somehow going to go over 200 touches this year. He's going to get 17 carries a game, and he'll have games where he has like 25 carries. I don't know how it's going to happen, but we know it's going to happen. And there's a lot to overcome for Gibson. So you could love the talent, but like talent is not everything when it comes to fantasy football.
Yeah, I mean, if it was, he'd be a first-round pick because we all believe he's really good. And as you were saying, Nick, like, what are the chances that 2 positions on this team, separate positions, produce as top 24 options? Like, I think Terry McLaurin can do it, but that doesn't mean I think Antonio Gibson can do it. I just don't think that there's enough firepower in this offense, especially with a completely new offensive system. The fact that Darius Geis was looking to be the workhorse or at least the lead back there, now he's gone. They got to change things up. So there's just a lot of moving parts in that offense. As you said, Adrian Peterson is still there. Rob Kelly's probably still there somehow. They just have so many different options in that backfield that aren't good, and we hope Antonio Gibson gets to step up and show what he's worth because we do believe he is the most talented player in that backfield at this point of his career. But even in Memphis, when he was extremely efficient, they weren't getting him the ball in his hands as much as they probably should have. And, I think, as Mike was saying, if he takes over Darius Geis's ADP, I think that's about fair. I mean, he'd be going after Tyler Boyd at that price, which is definitely reasonable. But even then, guys like Will Fuller in that range, or like a Julian Edelman. Edelman's more of a safer play, and Will Fuller's more of an upside play. But I feel like those are much, much safer picks than an Antonio Gibson, who could realistically be like a CJ Pro size 0 for you week in and week out, just because it might take time for him to transition from almost like a part-time player in college to being a full-time guy in the NFL.
We also have no fucking idea what his role is. Like, everything about Gibson right now is completely project. What if he just starts the year as like the running back 3 on the depth chart? That's not out of the range of possibilities at all. And you're going to use a 6th-round pick on him. Like, we've seen dumber shit happen in the NFL than putting him as the 3rd running back on the depth chart, So it's like 6th round, absolutely let someone else take him. I think once he starts getting to the 7th or 8th round, maybe you could do it. I'm probably going to let someone else draft him in my leagues because there's too much uncertainty around the situation and the role, because we have no idea what he's going to look like this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's all coming back to price, right? Like, look, when he was going in the 10th round, 12th round, I'm all about that, because at that range, I give 0 fucks about the floor of a player. I'm only looking for the upside, and it's a very, very unequal, like, weighted risk versus reward. But when you're creeping into like the 5th or 6th round, like, those are like literally guys you need to start like week 1. So, I mean, at that point, you kind of have to be out on that price for redraft purposes. And then, even in Dynasty, you guys got to be pretty on the lookout for this stuff, because, I've seen trades go through where like Antonio Gibson for like Henry Ruggs, Antonio Gibson for a first, Antonio Gibson for multiple firsts. Like, price is definitely getting up there. And, even as like
no one gave up multiple firsts for Antonio Gibson.
yeah, someone did. But like, I just think, like, even though we love Antonio Gibson, there are prices we got to be willing to exit at. And if I'm getting like a mid 2021 first, I'm totally happy pocketing that benefit we got, because look, we told you guys to draft him in the late 2nd round, and now that late 2nd round has turned into a 1st round pick in the matter of 2 months. So it's totally okay to pocket that profit and just like cash out. And that's something that I'll be looking to do in Dynasty. I have Antonio Gibson in a lot of places because, as you know, we've been touting him a lot. So I'm definitely going to start exploring, and even, just trading Antonio Gibson for like a Laviska Shenault in Dynasty. I think that's a trade you can get done immediately. You might even get something back,
easy,
like a 3rd round pick. Antonio Gibson for T Higgins, Antonio Gibson for that like tier of like 2nd round wide receivers, that tier 3 wide receiver group that we used to have. I think that is a money in the bank trade that you guys should all be exploring if you have Antonio Gibson, and one that I will definitely be doing.
Yeah, I think you got to be excited if you own Gibson in Dynasty, just because like any news like this is going to be good news for his outlook in his first year, which is important for his outlook going forward. I don't own him anywhere in Dynasty, unfortunately. The only league I do have him in is the Scott Fish Bowl, which I was kind of pumped about because he was like my 13th or 14th round pick there as like a running back dart. And now he shot up the draft board, and I need help at running back in that league badly. Someone from Big Dogs better fucking take home the crown Scott Fish Bowl. It'd be fucking sick. That'd be amazing.
Won't be me.
Nah, it won't be me either. I think that team stinks.
It's gonna be Animal.
Dude, that would be if it was Animal or George, I would lose my shit. I would absolutely lose my shit. It'd be amazing. Okay, that's all we got for today's app, right?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, so we will leave you with these parting words. Again, if you want the culmination of all of our work, everything that we have recorded and edited and researched over the last 5-6 months, it is available in the draft guide, monkeyknifefight.com. Use the promo code BDGE when you throw $10 to play with on their website. As soon as you play a game, you will get access to our draft guides, and we're doing 2 giveaways. Again, go subscribe to the Bunkbed Breakdowns YouTube and podcast. Leave a rating and review on their podcast, and you will be entered into the giveaway. And make sure you're following them too on Twitter as well. If y'all enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up. Subscribe to all the channels. All that stuff will be linked and explained in depth in the description down below. I'm going to go fucking pass away because it is Sunday evening and I've done way too much yelling today.
Nah, we got the narrative, dude. You're not going anywhere.
Fuck. Peace.